Sun and shade plants for the garden home and how to use them both inside and out. Coming up. Over the past 20 years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore ways to create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped to transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to The Garden Home, a show about garden design and ways to blur the lines between indoors and outdoors. Now in today's show, we're going to take a look at some great sun-loving and shade-loving plants. We'll also take a look at how to bring beautiful flowers indoors, just as they've done here in this greenhouse. For instance, bamboo is known as a great shade plant for screening in the garden. But did you also know that it's being grown for flooring materials and also as long-lasting decorative arrangements? And dahlias look great in full sun out in the garden, but they also make beautiful cut flowers indoors. I've got some great floral arranging tips coming up. I'll also show you ways to extend the garden into the cold months. And right now I'm going to carry these hyacinths over to the old carriage house and get started on a simple yet elegant arrangement that I'll show you a little later. But first, let's head to Holland and take a look at some bulbs that'll perform both in full sun and shade. Every time I visit Holland, I can be assured of one thing: fields and fields of color. Bulbs are a huge export product for this country, and gardeners all over the world are thankful for the hard-working Dutch farmers who continue to produce bulbs for sale. Tulips are the most recognizable of all the bulbs, and you might be surprised to learn that tulips originally came from Turkey and Western and Central Asia, not Holland. You see, back in the 16th century, a botanist named Carolus Clusius brought tulips from Turkey, and he later became the professor of botany at the University of Leiden, where he planted his tulips in gardens that are still part of the university today. Now let's talk about planting tulips in your garden home. First, pick a sunny location with well-drained soil and plant them in the fall before the ground freezes. Now here's something you may want to keep in mind if you live in an area where you don't get at least 6 weeks of freezing weather. You may want to pre-chill your tulip bulbs by placing them in ventilated bags in the refrigerator and keep the temperature between 40 to 45 degrees for about 40 days. If you have a dog or problems with ground burrowing rodents, you should use superphosphate rather than bone meal as fertilizer. And you might want to place a wire cage around the plants to protect them. Bulbs should be planted about 4 to 5 inches below the surface of the soil. Now, a frequent misconception about tulips is that they don't come back year after year. Actually, tulips are perennial in their native environment in Central Asia. In American gardens, hybrid tulips don't come back with the same vigor because the foliage dies back too soon, particularly in the South. You see, it's the foliage that reinvigorates the bulb. So if it dies back too soon because of the heat, there's little chance the tulip will come back. In northern gardens, there's a greater chance for tulips to be perennial because the spring is cooler and longer. But even in the north, you need to plant a few extra bulbs each fall to keep the display as effective and beautiful as it can be. You should know that there are some varieties that are more reliably perennial than others. Both species tulips and Darwin hybrids are known to return. The darker-hued Darwin hybrids do better than the pastel ones. In my garden, I grow a species tulip called Tulipa clusiana Lady Jane, and it's reappeared in the spring for several years now. But the modern hybrid tulips should be treated as an annual in southern gardens. You have to plant them each year, but the blooms are so beautiful it's still worthwhile. Okay, so tulips are a great bulb for sunny locations. Now let's talk with a bulb expert about a bulb that's good for the shade. Franz, when we think of flowering bulbs, we tend to first think of spring flowering bulbs,
yes,
daffodils, tulips, hyacinths, but there's so many wonderful summer flowering bulbs to grow in our gardens.
Well, that is of course where we Dutch are good in, that we produce bulbs year-round, and the summer flowering bulbs are of course marvelous to have.
Yeah, like eucomis or the pineapple lily.
Yeah, that's a beautiful plant.
Of course, it takes its name, pineapple lily, from the fact that these blooms look like tall pineapples.
Oh yes, but after the flowering, it really produces a nice seed pod.
Yes, they're spectacular.
Oh, beautiful. And that lasts until the frost arrives. And then, of course, you have to bring it inside because they are not frost resistant.
They're so easy to grow both in the container and in the flower border.
Well, that's the nice thing. And I combined, for example, eucomis with annuals, and that makes it much more brilliant in containers.
Well, the tall, spiky foliage can make a dramatic accent in a container. One of the best presentations I've seen here in Holland is this container you've created using the pineapple lily along with calla lilies and calabracoa spilling out of a long trough.
Well, the interesting thing is that it's an old bathtub where my great-grandfather was having his bath in.
Oh, really? A bathtub?
Yeah, a bathtub. And in the spring I always have mixed narcissi. In May everything goes out, and there I plant the
summer bulbs.
Right.
Now I find that my eucomis or pineapple lilies perform the best in full sun, but they'll take some shade.
Yes, they do. The only thing is that in the shade they really get very tall.
Yes, they'll stretch a little too much. You may have to stake them.
Yeah. That's the only difference. But they take every situation in the garden.
It has always astonished me that bamboos are actually grasses. They're in the same family. You know, this plant has garnered quite a reputation for being an invader in our gardens. But you know, there's no reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. There's so many wonderful varieties of bamboos. The key to growing them is containment. And I visited with Hank Gorders about this in the Netherlands. He's a Dutch nurseryman who specializes in bamboos. So Hank, over the past 10 years or so, have you seen bamboos increase in popularity?
Oh yes, for sure, because the people like the bamboos, especially because it's really from the eastern side. They say, hey, it's something else.
So you get a whole different look by using the bamboo, and ideal for Japanese or Chinese themed gardens.
Yeah, together with a lot of stones, white stones, little bridges.
The other aspect of bamboos that I think is so fascinating is there's such a wide range of heights and forms of the plant. And even the color of the stems themselves. I like the dark black stem bamboos.
That is very nice, but we also have a very nice clear yellow stems.
Yeah, golden stem.
Yeah,
ones.
yeah. Of course, you can use them in every spot of the garden because of the height. There are varieties which are growing not higher than that, even that, but there are varieties which grow up to about 6 or 7 meters high.
What about as container plants?
It's a very nice container plant, of course.
Is it something you need to move in generally?
Yeah, you do have to do that because when the plant is in a container, the roots can't have frost because they are in a container. When they are in the open ground, there's no problem.
Right.
Yeah? So you have to move them inside in a really winter period.
Right. Unless, of course, you live in a part of the United States where it's very warm all the time.
Then there's no problem at all. Yeah.
Bamboo has quite a reputation for being an invader.
There are some varieties which don't have this habit of having this underneath growers, but there are some, yes. And we use a sort of
a fabric.
That. It's thick like a container, and the bamboo roots don't grow through it.
Yeah. From a light standpoint, bamboos will grow, depending on the variety, in full sun and shade, won't they?
Full sun, no. They prefer a little bit more shade than full sun. There are even some bamboos, when they get too much sun, the leaf crawls up, and he says, I don't want so much sun, and in the evening it spreads out again.
Yes, I see. Yeah, marvelous natural mechanism.
Yeah, it's that.
You know, the garden home is about blurring the lines between inside and out. And during a visit to Callaway Gardens in Pine Mountain, Georgia, I saw an innovative building that was built with conservation in mind. Inside there are beautiful hardwood floors that are actually made from bamboo. But that's not the only environmentally friendly feature of this facility.
Callaway was founded in 1952 by Case and Virginia Callaway, and one of the very first things they did that was environmentally friendly was to save depleted cotton fields. What you see behind me, the Mountain Creek Lake, which is 175 acres, was actually depleted cotton fields when they found the land in the 30s and 40s. What they did was focus on native plants to this area, to the southeast, and plant those so that the guests could come in and enjoy a woodland. Today we have a mature woodland, and there are many other ways that we educate people about the environment and conservation. One way we do that is by providing bike paths and nature walks for people to get outside, and another way is through our attractions. Whether you're in the Day Butterfly Center or in the Sibley Center or here in the Discovery Center, you're going to see things that teach you about the environment, whether it be using bamboo floor instead of a wood floor, showing the life cycle of a butterfly and the importance of the rainforest, or even just merely using recycled products. Here at Callaway, people will go home with ideas that they can incorporate into their own homes that are environmentally friendly, using local materials, maybe rocks on your property or wood that's locally available to construct or renovate a home, using low-flow toilets or automatic sinks to conserve water. There are lots of ideas that you can incorporate that you'll find here at Callaway.
There is nothing more fragrant than hyacinths. This variety is called Blue Jacket. What a great way to bring a touch of spring into the home. Now, before we get too far away from this idea of bamboo, I want to share with you an idea that florists are using. It's quite innovative, and that's using bamboo in the home in a long-lasting arrangement. These bamboo cuttings are grown and trained into interesting shapes. Just look at the beautiful curvilinear shape of this stalk. Now, what's great about these is they'll grow in standing water. I've placed these cuttings in this tall cylinder vase, and I've anchored them with some large black stones. Now, what I like so much about this is that this style works beautifully in a contemporary or Asian-styled home. And as I said before, they will last for a long time, for years in fact, and what a great way to bring a touch of nature into the garden home. And it's interesting to know that lucky bamboo has been considered a symbol of good fortune in Asian cultures for over 4,000 years. It signifies prosperity, good health, harmony and peace, and it's said to create positive energy or qi in the environment. Now, I mentioned earlier that these bamboo arrangements are supported by these beautiful glossy stones. Let me show you another way that you can support flowers. Now, that's by using what is called a frog. Here are just a couple of examples. I collect these. I love to find them in secondhand stores and antique shops. Now, the reason they're called frogs is that you submerge them in water, and they serve as a support for flowers. You can see how they work. Now, I wouldn't normally use a frog in a clear vase, but I want you to see how they actually can support the flowers. And I have some little floribunda roses here that I'll use to illustrate how the mesh of this particular style of frog, the wire mesh, supports the stems of the flowers. Now, frogs were used before we had floral foams, such as Oasis, which is what's commonly used today. As you can see, this is a simple way to arrange cut flowers in your home. Now, another great way is to just bring forced bulbs inside, and that's what I've done with these gorgeous hyacinths. All I've done is taken a basket and lined it with some plastic just to keep water from getting on the table. And I've placed these 3 pots of Blue Jacket hyacinths in here, and I'm just going to simply cover the top with some sheet moss, and it'll look as though I went outside and unearthed a bit of the spring garden and brought it indoors. You know, there's nothing like having lots of fresh flowers around you in every season. Let me take you to the loggia in my garden for some tips on how to make a spring cut flower arrangement. Each spring when my garden is full of bloom, I'm always looking for ways to enjoy these beautiful flowers indoors. Now, I grow a wide range of flowers, everything from tulips to daffodils. Even the blossoms on my crabapple come in handy. I love using them in floral arrangements. My approach to any type of floral design has to be simple and easy. Let me show you a technique that only involves a pair of shears, a rubber band, the flowers, and of course, a container. You know, the biggest challenge for me in putting together any type of floral arrangement isn't so much the flowers themselves or even growing them, but it's coming up with just the right container. So over the years, I've collected a wide range of inexpensive containers that I've picked up at garage sales and flea markets. The key to this approach is simplicity. Let me show you how to put it together. You'll want to start with flowers of all the same variety and color. Now, measure the stems based on the container you want to use. Bundle them all together, and then wrap them with a rubber band, and push the rubber band as close to the flower heads as possible. Then cut off the stems at the desired length and put them in the container. As you can see, this approach applies to a wide range of flowers. There always seems to be something in the garden to dazzle us, particularly late in the season. And an excellent example of this are dahlias. Just look at all of these robust blooms and the festive colors. They can range in height from dwarf, about 15 inches tall, like these Dahlietta and Dallanova, or this one called Long Life, or they can grow as large as giants, which grow to about 6 feet or more. Like the marigolds, dahlias came into our gardens from their native Mexico. To produce outstanding blossoms such as these, you'll want to make sure you give them plenty of sun. One of the things I like about dahlias is they're not fussy about soil. Any average garden soil will do. When you fertilize, you want to make sure you don't give them too much nitrogen. You see, this will cause them to produce fewer blooms and soft, weak stems. If you live in a part of the country where cold winters and hard frosts are the rule, it's important to lift dahlia tubers or the roots from the ground and store them. I like to dig them at least with a 1-foot diameter root ball. Lift soil and all and put them in a cool, dark, dry place, and then cover them with dry sand or sawdust until I'm ready to replant them in the spring. In mild climates, dahlias are regarded as perennials and can be left in the ground through the winter by simply mulching the plants after you've cut them back in the fall. The way I see it, these flowers are worth any extra trouble you may have to go through to keep them from one year to the next. And another great thing about dahlias, they make good long-lasting cut flowers. And as you can imagine, with this kind of color, they can make a bold splash in the garden. Earlier, I took you to Holland, where we met Frans Rosen and learned about the great shade bulb Eucomus. Now let's head back to the Netherlands, where we can learn about a sun-loving plant called ornithogallum. Now, Jack, you all have grown gladiola for years and grow millions of them each year, but you also grow new varieties of flowers for the market as well.
Yeah, we grow ornithogallum soundersy, and this.
So these are all ornithogalliums.
Yeah, yeah, I will cut one. Here you are. It's a plant who needs a lot of heat.
A lot of heat.
A lot of heat, yeah.
Right, so for any sort of warm climate garden, this would be a good garden flower.
It can't stand frost, so when it's freezing, it's finito.
Yeah.
And when you plant it, you've got the soil here, you put the bulb on it, and the bulb will pull itself down.
Yep, you can see how you've grown them here. Yeah. A little bit of the bulb sticks up.
Yeah, but we started up, and now it's going down itself. It's got real strong roots. Yeah.
Amazing. And you see this flower as having a very bright future.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I keep going back to this idea of growing flowers to bring indoors. Well, it doesn't just apply to flowers. Of course, food is an important part of the garden home. I like to get a jump start on gardening, and every spring I'm anxious to plant some of my favorite vegetables. It may seem like winter outside, but spring is just around the corner. Even though temperatures are a little cooler, it's a good time to start thinking about planting vegetables. Some actually prefer the chillier temperatures. Now, don't get me wrong, planting a spring vegetable garden this early isn't for everyone, and it certainly isn't for every vegetable. For summer favorites like okra, squash, and tomatoes, they require much warmer temperatures. If I planted any of those now in this cold soil, they'd just sit there. They wouldn't grow. They'd just pout. Now, that's not the case for some of the earlier cool weather loving vegetables like broccoli, cabbage, kale, collards. I like to buy them in 6-packs like this, already started. It's much more convenient. Now, there are some things I plant from seed this early. Spinach, various types of lettuce, and English peas. Now, I don't want to mislead you. Even though many of these vegetables are regarded as cold tolerant, they can all be wiped out by a sudden severe drop in temperature. A cold snap can get them. So to help them along, I garden in raised beds like this. By raising the soil, the temperature warms up a little bit earlier in the spring. And I also use these cold frames, just made with 2x4 frames, concrete reinforcing wire, and some plastic. These allow me to raise the temperature slightly and keep it more even. But more importantly, it allows me to extend my gardening season, and I can have some of my favorite vegetables a little earlier. Whether for sun or shade, annual plants provide my garden with a bold splash of color throughout the growing season. And perennials, well, they're great because they return season after season. Let me show you some of my top plant picks for sun and shade. Let's start with sun plants. Now this first pick may surprise you. It's Coleus. Coleus has been long regarded as a shade annual, but this new line called Stained Glass Works is producing sun-loving Coleus like Fright Night, Tilt-a-Whirl, Kiwi Fern, Molten Lava, and Swiss Sunshine. I love the rich tapestry they create when planted in borders and the pizzazz they give a container. Other great sun performers include petunias. I enjoy using cascading petunias to spill out of containers, and Storm Series petunias in beds and borders because their blooms are resilient after a rainstorm. I recently discovered a new series of scavola or fan flowers, which are knockouts. During a visit to a marketplace for new plant introductions, I visited with Roger Elliott, one of the plant breeders who worked on these beautiful fan flowers. The most exciting aspect of being at the Flower Fields Marketplace for me is to see all these new varieties. And I've seen what you've done with the blue fan flower, but I also see a white variety over there as well.
Yeah, it's a lovely, nice, clear white, but sometimes early in its days you might get a little bit of blue. In the cooler weather, as the hotter weather comes, it'll be white all over, and it'll just flower through till fall. There is some smaller varieties, and Jacob's White is already out. It's a nice small white, and there's also Royal Pink, and that's being introduced next year. They cope with variations in moisture. If they dry out, you can water them, they come back fairly quickly.
Well, it's a wonderful addition to the American landscape. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you very much.
Now let's turn our attention to shade. For blooms in shade, you can't beat impatience. And if you want supersized blooms, then there's no doubt you'll want to try Supersonic New Guinea Impatiens. With colors like these, I don't mind planting them every summer. A shade garden wouldn't be the same for me without Columbine. I was at a nursery recently and learned about a new variety that takes its name from the Japanese art of paper folding. It's called Origami Aqualesia. The Origami series comes in a variety of colors, including yellow and blue. In my garden, I planted a mixture of the blue and white, yellow, and just plain white. The most spectacular characteristic of origami is that it blooms for 2 to 3 months rather than the usual 2 to 3 weeks of flowers produced by older varieties. A shade perennial ground cover that I'm fond of is Lamium. I grow several varieties, like this one called Lamium White Nancy, and this one called Anne Greenaway. Anne Greenaway is fairly new and has exquisite foliage that is a blend of dark and pale green, chartreuse, and silver. We've seen how to put plants to work for us in the vegetable garden, and we've gotten some ideas on plants to grow for making beautiful flower arrangements. I've given you a list of some of the plants I enjoy in both sun and shade. So how about a container recipe that you can use in your garden home? It starts with a large hanging basket, and I filled this with Hesperaloe and one of my favorite geraniums, a beautiful salmon-colored one called Schoen Helena. I also used the chameleon plant, Artemisia limelight, and this ornamental grass called Carax emerald to spill over the edge. I find that when putting containers together, if I use plants that are tall and spiky, round and full, and something to cascade, I can come up with a winning combination every time. Well, we've created some beautiful arrangements in today's show, as well as seen some wonderful flowers that'll perform beautifully both in sun and shade. I hope you found some ideas that'll help you create the garden home of your dreams. From the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at pallansmith.com.
On an upcoming episode of P. Alan Smith's Garden Home.
The Garden Home is all about blurring the lines between inside and out. And in this show, we'll look at some fun ways to do just that. Everything from picking, planting, and arranging roses to why my honeybees inspire not only my decorating, but also my cooking. It's a show full of great ideas, and I hope you'll join us.